Welcome back. So now it's still in the continuation, and in the language of Patanjali, we will talk. We have 3 classes left, and what I have tried that to give a overview of the whole concept of the Yoga Sutra. So I'm not going sutra by sutra, but we are going by the fundamental philosophical aspect of it, what Patanjali's message for us, what Patanjali wants to present, both from philosophical point of view and from the practice point of view. Because the Yoga Sutras need to be seen in the context of philosophy and practice both. And he has done the justice to this work by giving equal of everything. But if you are lost in the philosophical discussions only and we could not find the practical aspect of it, then it's not helpful. That is one reason on many of the aspects that Patanjali has explained in the Yoga Sutras, he is not so clear. His explanations there is no explanation, it is like stanzas, sutras. So already Patanjali has not explained, but whatever he is presenting, he is emphasizing the practice aspect instead of philosophical aspect. Wherever it is extremely required to discuss that philosophical aspect, he has done that. So the fundamental philosophical thing that Patanjali has spoke, we will see that, which is the idea of suffering. Why at all Patanjali need to make this sutra? Why he has to present the Yoga Sutras? For what? What was his intent behind presenting this whole scripture? So this scripture is like a map, road map for working out with the suffering that we are living into. And in this context, it's totally identical to Buddhist philosophy. I don't think we need much information about who was Patanjali and all that, so I am jumping, seeing the time limit of having 2 classes with us. So the idea that Patanjali is presenting in the sutra form, we all know that the sutras are like capsules in which the maximum information is given in minimum sentences, minimum words. And there was this special way of writing popular at that time. So there are a number of kinds of sutras composed in those times. Narad Bhakti Sutras are there, Vedant Sutras are there, Sankhya Sutras are there, Nyaya Vaisheshik Sutras are there. So Sutra is a style of writing in which things are connected in a thread form, concise, very precise, with minimum words, the maximum information is given. Expecting that there will be someone who will elaborate on it, coming from the tradition. And over the time, these sutras has undergone so much of maybe because they were rearranged, or there can be many possibilities, because when we look at those things, we don't find them in a sequence. So it is not that there is no sequence at all, but when we see the sequence, then we see the sequence in in parts. So suppose if we want to understand what is yoga, then first 4 sutras make a sequence. If you want to understand vrittis, then 5th to 11th sutra makes another sequence. If you want to understand practice and detachment, then these sutras will form a sequence. And then suddenly something else will come here, which is related to samadhi, which is hard to justify why it is there. Then Patanjali talks about the God, and then he explains certain things about it. And then in this way, what I'm saying is that when we understand sutras, the group of sutras are understood together, then it makes sense. If you take randomly something out of it and say why Patanjali has said and what he has said, you can completely misinterpret the whole information. Remember, what is said before, what is said after, we need to see the context. In which context Patanjali is talking here in this place? Because a lot of times he will take for granted the previous sutra and he said, if this is there, then the next thing is there. But if we go completely in a very chronological manner, we want to find a meaning, it could be hard. We have to take both approaches with understanding that we cannot be strictly going sutra by sutra and understand easily. Also, we don't take anything randomly out and say what is the meaning of it. We need always context, and Patanjali has presented things in a certain context. And one beautiful thing about the Yoga Sutras is that whenever he has mentioned some term, some name, he has always defined it himself. Another important thing to remember, which causes a lot of confusion, because if Patanjali has said something and you have popular meanings, you have some other meanings of that particular thing in your culture, in your context, then you can completely misunderstand that. When Patanjali says a particular thing, he always, or he tried his best to explain what he meant. An example is when he says surrender to God. He has explained what is God. Now, whatever you know about the God is useless. You can't mix it up with Patanjali. If you want to understand his intention of adding the God in his sutras, Ishvara in his sutras, then you understand what is his definition of Ishvara. Who is Ishvara? He said so and so. These are the characteristics. Philosophically, he has explained, but he is not responsible to explain mythological meanings of it. Again, in your culture, in this culture or that culture, mythological things can be there. Not obliged to explain, because he is teaching Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Yoga Darshan means philosophy. So what is the meaning of Rama, Krishna, Shiva? Patanjali does not care, because it is mythological thing and he does not go into that area. So you don't just go and ask Patanjali, you said God, and then they said that all the yoga is given by Shiva and all that. How is that possible? What God are you talking about? No, he's not talking about the mythological understanding. If you go in tantras, then there is a different language, different system, different meaning, context, where Shiva is everything, Shakti is everything. He does not talk about Shiva and Shakti. This is a care or a little awareness that we have to keep in mind when we are trying to understand what Patanjali wants to say and in which context he has said. And if he has said something, what is his point of view? So initially, you have to grasp that and keep aside your own understanding of it. Later, once you have got clarity, then you can make, okay, these are the similarities and Patanjali meant by this or that, and this God represents. You can make a completely another mythological story about it, and it's fine. Here, Patanjali is not responsible for anything then. Okay? Now, in any case, there is another problem that may come, that all the sutras that are commented, now they are commented by so many commentators and they have placed their own interpretation into it. Which one is correct, which is not correct? This is the freedom, actually, that you can develop your own understanding of Yoga Sutra in your context, like each commentator has done it. If a commentator has said something, you are always free to check on it, if it is correct or not. You can put your logic, you can put your all understanding into it. But who will be able to do that? The one who is a practitioner. It's a very important thing, because it is not merely a philosophical text. So philosophical aspects, any person who is not even practicing and sitting in library and researching 10 books and writing something, for us this Yoga Sutra is meaningless if we are not on the way, what this path that Patanjali has given to us. Just like reading a map, and you are nowhere, you are not going anywhere because it's lockdown and you can't go. So you are happy by reading the map of Rishikesh. Oh, this is the Rishikesh, and then Rishikesh is near Ganga, and it's so beautiful or so bad, whatever is your understanding of. So your understanding of the practice, but yes, you are in the Rishikesh, you are walking, experiencing it, and then first hand you experience, and then you have some chances of giving your personal meaning to it. And this personal meaning can also evolve. It is not one time thing that you have said, because it's all creation of mind again. And mind has a limit. And that limit today is this. So you understand only this much. So that's why this map and this walking on the path goes hand in hand. Then it becomes meaningful. So, as you know, the general idea. So this is one thing that we also have to keep in mind. As we are growing in our practice, we are looking at the sutras again and again and again, they make a lot of clarity to us. They bring clarity to us. It's not a one-time reading like a novel. You read it and then put it uh, in a shelf, and then you say, okay, I'm done with the yoga. Each time we sit, because we have practiced for this much time more, then it has given little more clarity further. In that sense, you are free to take your own understanding based on all the commentaries and all the information, giving it a personal meaning on the basis of practice. So in this way, sutras are written, and they have this intent that they are like the, you can say that, like the signboards, directions, milestones. So you are on the way, and you meet, oh, this is the direction, I am on the right path. Confirmation of something. So you can find that map whenever you feel lost. Okay, go back to it, revisit it. Given all the facts that you have collected with your own experience, then it will be alive. The sutras will be alive. Otherwise, they are very boring, and they can be very good cure for the insomnia for a lot of people. If you have sleeping disorders, maybe you can use them. Okay, but that's not the purpose of yoga sutras. They are supposed to awaken us, not to make us sleep. And how is that possible? When we are reading them while we are walking. If you are sitting, doing nothing, and reading Yoga Sutra, you fall asleep. Now, in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he has spoke about the concept of pain, concept of suffering. It is in the Sutra number 16 of chapter 2. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of philosophy of yoga. So I will start from here, not Sutra 1. The fundamental thing, what Patanjali wants to do with the Yoga Sutras, why Patanjali has given us this Shastra, this scripture, what is his primary purpose of presenting this knowledge to us? It is to give a method to overcome the suffering. So the philosophical aspect is here. Here Patanjali is raising a very, very good question. And he is saying, and he is actually giving a hope. Now, up to this point, if we have not experienced what Patanjali has started saying here in this philosophical quest, then we cannot begin with the Yoga Sutras. Then the Yoga Sutras study is meaningless. That is recognition of pain or suffering in life. Just as Buddha has said, there are 4 noble truths. So Patanjali's noble truths are that there is pain, there is cause of pain, there is a possibility to overcome that pain, and then there is a method of overcoming the pain, suffering. means anyone who has not come up to this clarity yet that there is suffering, the Yoga Sutras will not make sense to this person, because then it will be very pessimistic kind of approach to life. Because see, what is this? I'm having fun in my life, and you are saying life is a suffering, then you will not go ahead. A large part of the society is in this dilemma or in this mindset. They have a hope somewhere else. The Yoga Sutras will not make sense. The beginning of Yoga Sutra is this, with this acknowledgement of the fact that there is suffering. So by this time, when we are here, already this fact is so clear, there is suffering. There is no question to argue whether it is not. Patanjali has not argued that you must accept there is suffering. He has not said anything like that. He simply said one thing in Sutra 16, the suffering that has not yet arrived can be avoided. Means he is so optimistic here. Actually, in this situation of so pessimist idea, he has found a hope. But other hopes has already been means you have this hopelessness in all the other places of entertainment. Unless that has not happened, for Patanjali, there is no meaning for this search. But in that search, then he made it beautiful. He said that suffering which has not yet arrived means it is a preventive approach of therapy. Therapy is actually after you have the disease, right? Therapy means that already you have a disease and then you are treating it. So that is therapy. But this approach is preventive. He said, okay, already if there is suffering, what to do about it? He said, you have to bear the consequences of it. But he is talking about something higher in this philosophical question, that suffering which has not yet arrived can be avoided. The suffering that has arrived already, you are already going through it. The suffering of being in this body, what to do about it? You are already having it. Because of that, you are born. Because of that, all the fundamental pain, we are here. He's saying now what you can do about it. And then he has explained what is the cause of suffering. So that suffering, there is suffering, and then what is the cause of suffering? So he says the identification of the seer and the seen is the suffering. That this Purusha, the seer, and the seen, Prakriti, there is a identification or misidentification. That is the cause of the suffering. Why do we suffer? Because there is a identification. Now, is it possible to break this identification? Answer is yes. And how? that there is a method. And then he has explained various methods in the Yoga Sutras. Now you understand our approach. What are we going to do now? That there is suffering and this whole idea of suffering is existing. So from Sutra 16 to 27 explained the whole idea of it, philosophical idea of it, and we have studied it in the Sankhya philosophy already. And this idea of suffering is, he has given the techniques, he has given methods how to overcome that suffering. That is the practical question now onwards. Up to this is philosophical question. But when he comes to methods, it becomes practical. And that's why Yoga Sutra is combination of philosophy and practice. Now, this suffering thing, if we go further into this, how do we experience that suffering? The one very fundamental thing that Patanjali has mentioned is the kleshas. 5 kleshas. 5 afflictions, miseries in chapter 2, Sutra 3 onwards. How do we experience the suffering? In the form of these kleshas. So what is the, now these kleshas are responsible for all sufferings. Who is responsible? What is the root cause of all suffering? The first klesha that Patanjali has said is avidya, ignorance or lack of awareness. Now these kleshas transmigrate with us, and due to these kleshas, because we are performing all the karmas because of the avidya, then avidya is called as the field. This ignorance is that field of the field where all the other kleshas will grow. And then what is avidya? So the first sutra about avidya is, the ignorance creates all other obstacles, means all other kleshas. They may exist either in the potential, or they can be prasut, means they can be dormant, they can be diluted, they can be scattered, and they can be fully functional. These are the 4 stages of kleshas that Patanjali has explained. He's saying that the kleshas, when they are fully functional, then they are very intense and it causes suffering. That's why we suffer when the kleshas are fully functional. When they are scattered, means sometimes we are suffering, sometimes we are okay. This can be scattered state, it can be the fully functional state. So suppose if anger is fully functional, then it will bring all the reactions in our body mind. But at that time, this is how we can understand what is dormant. Love is dormant. When the love is fully functional, then your other kleshas are in dormant. Now you understand how they operate. They operate in that field of ignorance. Any stimulus can make these kleshas functional anytime, because it's a field, and in that field there is a seed, and as and when it gets water and food, it's functional, and that is the suffering. Now, what actually means avidya? In the next sutra, it is explained. What is avidya? Avidya is, it's not wrong knowledge, or it's not bad knowledge, but it's completely misunderstanding. And what is that misunderstanding? The misunderstanding is to regard the non eternal as eternal. Anitya, ashuchi. To ashuchi means impure. The impure as pure, the painful as pleasant, and the non-atman or non-self as self. These are the four things that Patanjali has mentioned here regarding the explanation of avidya. What is that? It is our misperception of what is in front of us, seeing it as something else. So let's take an example of it. We know that which is impermanent, we take it as permanent. Various examples that we can see in our life, and it causes suffering at the end. Means how the kleshas are making us suffer by this misperception of the truth. The truth is that the impermanent, we have taken it as a permanent entity. And because it is impermanent and it has a time duration and it expires after that, and that causes us pain, that causes us suffering. So in this way, all these examples of like this body, we can take one example. It is so deeply, because of our ignorance, it is so deeply identified me as body. Or also impure as pure. Whatever the things that we take as pure, but in reality they are impure. And we give so much value to that impure thing, and it turns out to be impure in reality, and it causes pain. In our relationships, we can see this. In our workplace, we can see these, all the identification, all not identification, but you can say imposition of the false idea regarding any situation in life. We can see that how these things are operating. Just in this case, that this person who has entered into his house has got identified with it so much, forgetting the fact that he's just a caretaker there for some time, and he has taken it as his own house. And when the owner comes, it's pain and don't want to leave it. In all the relationships that we impose extra values which does not belong to those things, then it will be a suffering. Now, here they are not saying that you should hate the body. This is not going to be the correct perception either. Of course, the body is perishable. The body is impermanent. So putting this into the clarity and taking care of it in right perspective and correct this misperception is the whole work that is required. So the avidya is that klesha, that suffering which we are which is cause of the cycle of life and then death and then again rebirth and again, because it transmigrates. So kleshas do transmigrate with body, with your the subtle body. Now I'm trying to explain. So avidya is clear that avidya is this misperception of the reality based on the identifications, based on the false ideas, false imposition of the values that we have mistakenly given to the things. And it will cause all the troubles to us. Similarly, vrittis. This is another way through which we experience suffering. The other four kleshas are there, much easier to understand. Rag, dvesha, you can understand that already. So I'm trying to connect some idea here that suffering, Patanjali Yoga Sutras is saying about suffering. How do we experience suffering? Kleshas in the form of avidya, in the form of raga, asmita, dvesha, fear of death. They transmigrate. We carry all these impressions from the past. Then the another thing is vrittis. Now vrittis in the first chapter of Yoga Sutra. That's where Patanjali is saying yoga chitta vritti nirodha. What are vrittis? Vrittis are also 5. Kleshas are also 5. Through those vrittis also we experience that suffering. And these 5 vrittis, they are not operative earlier, but they start to operate as we grow. For a very young child also, if we see that the fear of death is there, for a very young child we can see the attachment with the mother, raga is there, aversion to anyone who tries to have the rag with the mother, the children don't like the fathers are not accepted when they go close to the mother in the presence of a very young child, right? Do you know this or not? I can see this. Very young children. That's why you have to sometime, you have this freedom. Then you ask your friend, please have this child for one day and do this, what do you call it, this babysitting. We have not enjoyed for a very long time any, and then you hand over your child to someone. Then why? Because this child hates you that you possess the mother. What I'm saying is there is this grip of avidya, this grip of dvesha, the grip of attachment, fear of death, or love for life, and I-ness. My mother, my father, my toy, my this, my that. So these are psychological, the kleshas are psychological drives or motivations. They are not cognitive processes. They are much more, of course, they are in your perception, but they come into your body. The reaction of it is very physical. When you have this attachment and when this person is taken, you have dvesha and it comes into your body. It's very deep into every cell, every tissue. Means this grip of kleshas is very, very deep. Whereas vrittis are cognitive processes which dominates or operates as we grow older. They are not very functional like for a 1-month-old child or 6-month-old child, because the cognitive processes are not yet developed. In the cognitive processes that Patanjali says that yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So here what Patanjali is saying, vritti. Vritti means circular. Means all those operations, all those processes, cognitive processes that they happen in a circular manner. Means, for example, you get one thought and you all day carry on with the same thought, with anger, with whatever the situation is. This is vritti, because vritti is operative, and when vritti is operative, it's circular, and this circular movement of the cognitive processes causes all the disturbance in the chitta. Through the yogic process, what are we doing in the name of asana, pranayam? We are trying to stop that circular motion by spreading that energy in a somatic sense. If I talk that when you do the asana practice, what happens to that circular energy which was only in your head aspect, into your cognitive aspect, dispersed into your limbs? The energy goes to your hands, fingers, toes. And when you do your asanas practice, the asanas practice will help your vrittis to settle down. Because that circular motion which was in your cognitive processes earlier has started to settle down with your asana practice. With the meditation practice, because you are not going circular with your thoughts, but you take something, you are not going circular, but you be stable somewhere, and that thing which is going circular, you start to slow down that process of this movement. Now, how all the systems, all the spiritual traditions has given different ways to it. Ashtanga Vinyasa. Ashtanga Vinyasa is that very strong method of, because the circular motions of the vrittis are driving you crazy. How do you deal with it? Okay, move in this particular way and have one aspect you which is in you which is not moving, and you move the breath, you move the body, and that circular energy which were building up in the head settles down. So in the beginning, your breath is fast, your movement is fast because the circular motions are faster. So you match with them. As Kamalji says that somebody is driving a car and if you want to catch, then you have to go with it and then hold it with you and then go with it. Means first you have to race with it. So with this movement, with breath, you are doing the same process here. Getting it? That these vrittis, all kinds of vrittis are cognitive processes, and this cognitive process is very interesting. Pramana vritti. All the knowledge that we receive through our senses. That is direct perception of the knowledge, direct perception of the things. It is three types. It can be with the inference, and it can be testimony. It is a vritti. However, in the beginning, we find it difficult that why praman is vritti. Because ultimately, all the knowledge that we are receiving through the senses is a vritti. It brings a circular motion. All these processes. Now, in this vritti, what is interesting thing? That there is an object and the perception. Both the things are there. In other words, the easy way to say it. So, chitta vrittis are based on awareness or non-awareness of external object, whether this object is present or not. So, the pramana or the direct perception or the inference and the testimony, the object is present and it is perceived as it is. Praman vritti is this. Now, viparya, what happens in the second vritti, in the wrong knowledge? The object is present, but it is perceived wrong. So there is a rope, the object is there. So in praman vritti, if you see the rope as rope, it is praman vritti. But when you see the rope as a snake, when you see it as a snake, then the object is not there, but you are identifying, you are misplacing the value of the snake into it. So there is no objective, or I mean the object is not perceived properly. Then the third one, there is no object. It's pure imagination. So in the vikalp, there is no object, no external object, but it is perceived as if it is there. You see how how processes are happening in our mind. There are things that are actually existing in front of us. They cause certain problems to us. They can be klishta or aklishta. So vrittis can be painful or not painful. Then there are things that we completely perceive wrong. The things are there, but they are not how we see them. This is another cognitive process that we have. In the third, in imagination, there is no object, but we imagine that as if it is there. Fantasy. So in that mode of fantasy, you are on your bed and then you have all the fantasy of what is not there. There's no object. There's no one. But you have everything playing inside the head. Fourth is sleep. Now in this, No prior experience is required. There is no object in the sleep, and not necessarily dependent on prior experience. Means in the sleep, the experience that you are having, there is no object. You have no idea where you are. And in the last one, which is memory, which is smriti, there is no object in your memory, but previous experience is there. So you depend on your previous experience when it comes to the memory vritti, smriti vritti. Now, what I'm trying to say is that all these cognitive processes that are happening, Patanjali has very roughly said this is 5 types of cognitive process. Means there is object and there is perception of object. There is object but wrong perception of the object. Vikalp, there is no object and you are still perceiving it. And in this way, we see that our mind has a huge range of cognitive processes, where Patanjali has just said 5 types of them. Means circular emotions. Now, it is important to understand one thing, that there can be numerous cognitive processes which Patanjali has not bothered to explain. Why? Because whatever the cognitive process is, whatever the circular motion is, it has to stop. He roughly tried to put the things that these are the vrittis, this is how they function. Some vrittis can be painful, some vrittis can be not painful. And those, all the painful vrittis are kleshas. Klishta. So the klesha is the same root word. So just now when we understood kleshas, is more psychological drive. Vrittis are cognitive processes. And then third aspect that Patanjali has said is chitta vikshepa, which is more gross, easy, and it is not transmigrating, it is accumulated in our experiences here. Sutra 130. Vyadhi, styan, sanshay means the disease, dullness, doubt, carelessness, laziness, delusion, all those 9 obstacles that Patanjali has mentioned. They are more gross. And then 4 others, they are in the 31. Dukh dormanas means pain, bad state of the mind, tremor in the body, irregular breath. Now all these are nothing but the ways we experience pain, suffering. And Patanjali's Yoga Sutras deals with it, with various techniques, with various methods. Primarily, what Patanjali Yoga Sutras are doing with us, they are giving us the methods to overcome the kleshas, the vrittis, and the chitta vikshepas. And for that, the entire Yoga Sutra is a method. And we'll talk about those methods in the next class. I took extra 15 minutes. Sorry for that. And because I didn't see the watch. So we'll continue on that. What are those methods? And we will discuss on that. I have not gone in much detail of vrittis and kleshas yet. And I don't think we will have that much time. So please read. And in the next class, if there are any questions, that we will deal. And then we will proceed on the method. Okay. I am assuming that you are already familiar with the vrittis and kleshas, but we are seeing this in a particular context. What Patanjali wants to teach us, what he wants to show us through the Yoga Sutras, the method for what. So we are trying to see the things in a way that we can see the overview of the Yoga Sutras completely. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.